I never imagined that the deepest wound of my life would come not from a stranger, but from the very person I once trusted more than anyone. It all began the moment I learned that the home I believed would be my peaceful new chapter was secretly turned into a financial weapon behind my back. In one breath, my dream life shattered, and the person I loved became the source of my greatest fear. Betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it wears a familiar face and calls you family, right before it takes everything you built for your future. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, do not forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you will not want to miss. Let's get started. My name is Margaret Maggie Reed, and I turned 68 years old 3 months ago. I have lived most of my life in Cleveland, Ohio, inside a small and ordinary suburban home that carried the scent of winter for half the year. I worked for more than 4 decades as a head nurse in a large hospital, where I learned to memorize medical charts faster than I memorized birthdays or anniversaries. When my husband passed away after a long battle with heart disease, the house that once felt warm and purposeful slowly turned into a quiet box that echoed with routines instead of laughter. I retired earlier than I expected, yet I continued to wake up every morning as if I still had a shift to prepare for. I made breakfast alone, walked the same neighborhood loop, and became that predictable woman who always brought the same oatmeal cookies to church charity events. I never used words like boredom or loneliness, but silence became heavy enough for me to feel it pressing on my chest. I learned to be useful, strong, reliable, and necessary, but I never learned to choose something beautiful for myself. My entire life was a cycle of care, sacrifice, delayed dreams, and waiting for a permission that never arrived. I once believed fulfillment belonged only to the young, because they held the right to change directions, fail, and begin again. One afternoon, while packing away a box of medical journals, I paused and asked myself a question that felt almost foreign. What did I want for the rest of my life? I realized that it was the very first time I had ever asked myself a direct question that did not involve someone else's comfort or safety. A strange warmth traveled through me, and I remembered how often I had pictured the sea when I was younger. I dreamed of sunlight that cut through open windows, the hush of waves outside a porch, and a place where time did not push me forward like a hospital clock. During the following months, I reviewed my savings, my retirement funds, and the money my husband had left. I made a choice that would have shocked the younger version of me. I decided to buy a mansion near the water in Sarasota, Florida, where the air smelled like salt instead of antiseptic. The house that captured my heart had a soft white roof, 4 spacious bedrooms, a small swimming pool behind a wooden deck, and a private dock that reached out into the bay like an invitation toward a slower world. The room that sealed my decision was a glass reading room with a wide ocean view, large enough for a rocking chair and a table for books and tea. I imagined my mornings filled with warm light, gardening tools, handwritten letters, and the comfort of knowing that every minute belonged to me. When I signed the final purchase documents, my fingertips trembled as if I was touching a new identity. It felt like a quiet declaration that my life was not over, but expanding. I whispered 2 soft words inside my mind. I choose. If you're still watching and feeling the tension building, please comment number 1 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's see how everything takes an unexpected turn in Chapter 2. After finalizing the purchase of the mansion in Sarasota, I decided to delay my move for a few days because I wanted to visit my daughter in Austin, Texas. I booked a flight, packed a small suitcase, and traveled with a heart filled with excitement about a fresh chapter. Even though a soft whisper of doubt lingered somewhere inside my mind, Austin welcomed me with a different rhythm than the gentle coastal air of Florida. The city buzzed with new ideas, startup centers, yoga studios, eco-friendly coffee shops, and motivational banners that seemed to appear on every corner. It was obvious that Austin represented ambition, while Sarasota represented peace. I began to wonder where my daughter truly belonged within that contrast, and where I truly belonged as well. Olivia lived in a modern condominium near downtown. The building had a tall glass entrance and smelled like luxury candles mixed with citrus. When she opened the door, she hugged me with warmth, and for a moment, everything felt normal. However, I noticed that her eyes looked slightly exhausted, like someone who had not been sleeping enough. Her voice remained confident, and her movements were quick, purposeful, and full of visible tension. She proudly told me that her wellness retreat project was growing and that she had been busy meeting investors, designing plans, and preparing for future retreats. She shared it as if success was guaranteed, while I silently wondered if she had allowed herself time to breathe. Despite the distance that adulthood placed between us, my heart still believed that Olivia was the same little girl who once cried over a broken seashell and hid behind my hospital coat during thunderstorms. Over the years, the closeness that once felt natural slowly weakened, not because of lack of love, but because of different worlds. She moved fast, spoke loudly, planned boldly, and believed that emotion needed to be managed like a business asset. I moved slowly, observed quietly, trusted empathy, and still believed that love was not something to negotiate. She thought I was too traditional, and I thought she ran too quickly toward something she had not fully understood. That evening, she prepared a formal dinner that resembled a celebration. The dining table was decorated with polished silverware, a vase of lilies, dim golden candles, soft jazz music, and dishes that she clearly spent hours arranging. The food looked elegant, but the atmosphere felt heavy beneath the surface. Olivia smiled brightly, yet her eyes shifted away frequently. She took her phone to the kitchen several times, answering calls in a lowered voice, and she tapped her fingers on her glass as if trying to control her own anxiety. I felt a quiet pressure settle over my heart, the kind of pressure that appears when something important remains unspoken. After dinner, we stepped out to the balcony. The sky above Austin shimmered with city lights. Olivia finally spoke with a trembling voice and mentioned that there was something about my mansion that she needed to tell me before I moved into it. She paused, said that the mansion was not exactly only a place for me to live, and then her phone rang again. She promised to explain everything the next morning. I lay awake in her guest room with the distinct feeling that my peaceful dream home was already shadowed by a storm I could not yet see. If this story is hitting deeper than you expected, comment number 2 below to show you're still here. Now, get ready because Chapter 3 reveals a truth no one saw coming. The next morning arrived with a pale gray sky that seemed to press down on the city. I woke early inside the guest bedroom, feeling heavy and unrested. The unanswered sentence from the night before echoed inside my mind like a slow and persistent heartbeat. I dressed carefully, expecting clarity, though a quiet fear curled inside me like a cold ribbon of smoke. Olivia suggested we meet at a small lakeside coffee shop that she claimed helped her think clearly. I followed her there, believing that daylight would bring honesty. The coffee shop was peaceful, decorated with plants, soft colors, and long wooden tables filled with young professionals tapping on laptops. Olivia ordered a latte, but barely touched it. Her hands kept circling the mug while her eyes drifted away, searching for words or courage. When she finally spoke, her voice carried both tension and shame. She explained that her wellness retreat business was drowning financially, even though her public speech always portrayed it as a rising star. Investors were demanding results, bank statements were alarming, and the projection chart she once displayed proudly no longer reflected hope. She added that she had tried everything except giving up, because surrender felt like a personal failure that she refused to accept. Her next sentence sliced through me more sharply than I expected. She admitted that she had used my social security number, birth date, and the Sarasota mansion purchase information to create a business asset link that would allow her to secure more funding. I remembered every electronic document she had sent me during the home purchasing period, which I signed under the belief that they were simply part of the financial release and closing process for the mansion. I remembered her reassuring tone, telling me that modern paperwork could be handled digitally to avoid stress. I realized that I had signed more than I understood, and she had allowed me to remain uninformed, even though she understood the consequences. She continued speaking quickly, almost breathlessly. She explained that the mansion had been listed as collateral, meaning that if her business failed to pay its debt, the bank or investors could legally take the mansion in order to recover losses. The word collateral felt like a hammer hitting a glass window. My dream home was not a sanctuary, but a bargaining chip. The beautiful reading room, the dock over the water, the hallway I imagined decorating, all became numbers inside a financial document. I sat very still, unable to swallow. I stared at my daughter, searching for the child I once rocked to sleep. Instead, I saw a woman who believed that success required sacrifice, even if the sacrifice belonged to another person. Olivia attempted to justify her actions by saying that the arrangement was temporary. She insisted that once her retreat succeeded, the mansion would still be mine, and we both would benefit from its value. She spoke as if she had done something strategic, not harmful. Her tone held conviction, but it lacked empathy. Inside my chest, something loosened painfully, like the tearing of thin cloth. I felt betrayed, not only because she used my name, but because she never asked if my stability mattered as much as her ambition. I looked through the window at the calm lake. A few ducks glided along the surface, unaware of anything human. My life had always been about protecting others, yet at that moment, no one had protected me. My hands trembled slightly beneath the table, and my breath felt shallow, as if every dream I had just built in Sarasota was already dissolving. The realization settled slowly but firmly. My daughter had not seen me as a person with limits, only as a resource that she believed she had the right to access success. The foundation beneath my hopeful new beginning began to crack, and I wondered if I had misinterpreted the meaning of family all along. If you're still watching and your heart just dropped a little, comment number 3 to let me know you're following every detail. Now, take a breath. Chapter 4 goes even darker. I left Austin earlier than planned, carrying a heavy silence inside me as I boarded the plane back to Sarasota. The sky outside the window looked peaceful, but my thoughts churned like a storm that refused to settle. The mansion that once symbolized freedom and peace now felt uncertain, as if its walls were no longer built from concrete and paint, but from signatures, documents, and hidden agreements. When I arrived and stepped through the front door, the air inside felt unfamiliar, almost cold. I walked slowly through each room, touching the smooth surfaces, as if I was checking whether the house still belonged to me in spirit, even if it was compromised on paper. Something precious inside me seemed bruised, and I understood that trust, once fractured by deceit, did not heal with sleep. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with a real estate attorney whose office was located near downtown Sarasota. I carried 2 folders filled with printed email messages, digital documents, and screenshots of every signature request that I had completed. When I met him, he greeted me with professional calmness, and I explained every detail from the beginning of my home purchase to the moment of my daughter's confession. He reviewed each document carefully, occasionally pausing to rewrite or highlight certain sections. After a long stretch of silence, he explained that the mansion was legally under my ownership. but it had been registered as a financial guarantee by the business that my daughter operated in Austin. He warned me that if the company failed to maintain its repayment obligations, the mansion could be seized and sold, regardless of my age, plans, or intentions. My breath grew shallow as he continued to explain that my digital signatures were technically valid under electronic agreement law. The realization settled slowly and painfully. I had unknowingly participated in my own vulnerability. Even though he assured me that there were potential legal strategies to reverse or renegotiate terms, none of them would be simple or gentle. I left the office feeling a mixture of fear, shame, and disbelief, but also a faint spark of determination. I promised myself that I would not become a silent victim inside my own story. Later that week, while watering small potted plants near the porch, I saw a man across the street trimming hibiscus bushes. He appeared to be in his early 70s, with silver hair, calm movements, and a gentle presence that reminded me of old-fashioned wisdom. He noticed me, waved politely, and walked over to introduce himself as Harold Coleman, a retired tax accountant who had lived in the neighborhood for more than 20 years. His voice carried warmth and a patient tone, and our conversation flowed naturally. He invited me to sit on his shaded porch, where he offered iced tea and stories about the sound of the bay during storm season. I surprised myself by sharing a short version of my situation, not out of desperation, but because he felt safe to speak to. Harold listened without judgment, then offered his help to review the printed documents again, using his years of tax and contract experience. When he read through the final pages, his expression changed subtly as he pointed out a clause titled Post-Mortem Transfer Provision. This clause stated that if I passed away, the full right of usage and operational control of the mansion would automatically transfer to a wellness foundation affiliated with the business, rather than to my legal heir or estate. The words pressed into me like ice water. It meant that someone had written plans for my home that reached beyond my own lifetime, without my consent. I returned to my mansion that evening with slow steps and trembling hands. I sat on the edge of the bed until the sky darkened. It felt as though my life had been drafted into a future I did not choose, and I understood with painful clarity that love without boundaries becomes a weapon against the one who gives it. If you're still here and can already feel the emotional storm rising, comment number 4 right now, because what happens next in Chapter 5 will change everything. I spent 2 days in Sarasota gathering my composure, and then I booked a ticket back to Austin. I understood that if I avoided confrontation, I would surrender both my home and my dignity. The fear inside me transformed into a quiet determination. I packed documents, printed evidence, and every email that carried the weight of my trust. During the flight, I rehearsed calm sentences in my mind, because anger would only weaken my clarity. I reminded myself that I deserved to speak truth in front of people who believed they had the right to use my name as a convenient financial tool. When I arrived in Austin, I called Olivia and requested that she include me in the scheduled business meeting with her attorney and her primary investor. She sounded surprised, but pleased, as if she believed I had finally accepted her vision. She did not realize that I was not returning to support a dream, but to reclaim the foundation of my life. The meeting was set for the following afternoon at a modern co-working building near downtown, a place filled with glass walls, motivational quotes, and shared desks occupied by young entrepreneurs with restless ambition. I arrived early and waited in the lobby, absorbing details that now felt strangely symbolic. The hallway walls displayed framed images of peaceful forests, handwritten affirmations, and promotional posters for future retreats. In one of those posters, I recognized my own mansion, edited to appear as an exclusive luxury retreat destination. My name appeared beneath it with the title Founding Patron, a role I had never agreed to. I stared at the poster long enough to feel a slow burn rise beneath my skin, not from rage, but from humiliation. My life had become marketing material for a project built on unspoken assumptions. Inside the conference room, a long glass table dominated the space. Olivia sat near the head with an optimistic posture, while her attorney reviewed papers stacked neatly beside a laptop. The investor, a woman named Marcia Lawson, arrived shortly after. She was elegant, composed, and observant, with the demeanor of someone who recognized sincerity without needing lengthy explanations. When the introductions ended, I asked to speak first, and nobody objected. I began by explaining every step from the moment I started my home purchase to the moment I discovered the collateral registration. I spoke slowly, without accusation, because truth is powerful without raised voices. I explained that I had signed digital forms under the belief they were routine closing documents for my home purchase, not business agreements. I stated that I had never offered my property, my identity, or my future as a financial guarantee. For a moment, the room grew still, as if the air itself had paused. Olivia interrupted to argue that her decisions were strategic and temporary. She attempted to paint the situation as a misunderstanding caused by generational differences. She hinted that I exaggerated risk because I did not understand business culture. Her tone suggested that my value existed only within her vision of success, not within my own need for safety and respect. My heart tightened, but my voice remained steady. The investor turned to the attorney with a direct question regarding the authenticity of the signed documents. He hesitated, lowered his gaze, and admitted that several signature pages submitted to investors had been formed using scanned copies of my original signature, not newly executed permission. His quiet confession spread through the room like a cold wind. It confirmed that the issue had crossed not only moral boundaries, but legal boundaries as well. Silence followed. It did not feel like victory, only clarity. The dream image of a peaceful retirement home had shattered, but in its place rose something stronger than comfort: ownership of my voice. I left the building aware that the situation had changed forever, and that the next steps would no longer be dictated by fear, but by choice. I returned to the hotel after the meeting feeling as if my body belonged to gravity and my heart belonged to uncertainty. The room was quiet, clean, and arranged with perfect lines, yet nothing inside me felt orderly. I sat down on the edge of the bed, removed my shoes with trembling hands, and closed my eyes. The silence only amplified the noise inside my mind. I loved my daughter more than any possession, achievement, or comfort in my life, yet she had placed my future on a scale without asking whether I wished to be weighed at all. I felt torn between protecting her dreams and protecting my own right to safety, dignity, and peace. The conflict did not feel dramatic. It felt like a long, slow burn that could not be soothed by sleep or tears. Hours passed as I reflected on what choices stood before me. The first possibility was to ignore the entire situation and allow the business to run its course, even if it meant living with the risk of losing my home. That option would preserve family harmony on the surface, but I would silently participate in my own erasure. The second possibility was to negotiate privately with Olivia, to convince her to restructure the agreements, perhaps seek a different form of funding, or gradually release my property from collateral. However, that required trust, and trust could not be forced into existence simply because blood connected two people. The third possibility was to use the legal system to reclaim my rights. That path felt cold but honest. It accepted reality rather than the sentimentality that mothers often hold like a duty. As night fell, memories surfaced gently, bringing images of my life before all of this turmoil. I remembered holding Olivia as a newborn after my husband died. Unexpectedly, I raised her alone with a fierce promise that she would never feel abandoned. I encouraged her imagination, her independence, and her ambition. I repeated the phrase that felt like love at the time: follow your dreams. I will always stand behind you. Now, I wondered if she had grown up believing that my role was not simply to love her, but to cushion every consequence she created. My love, though sincere, might have unintentionally taught her that my well-being was secondary. Near midnight, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. On the other end, I heard the steady, composed voice of Marcia, the investor. She explained that she wished to speak privately, without the involvement of attorneys or business partners. She shared that she had received several concerning reports about the company, including an internal complaint from a former employee who believed that financial projections had been altered to appear more promising. Although the accusations were not yet verified, they raised concerns that went beyond poor planning. She expressed that she did not want to invest in a business that relied on concealed agreements, emotional manipulation, or unlawful documentation. Marcia then proposed something unexpected. She suggested that the two of us quietly gather clarification together before taking any decisive legal steps. She offered her resources to help investigate whether other documents had been altered or misrepresented. She believed that truth, once collected properly, could protect both of us from unnecessary damage. Her words were not comforting, but they were steady and rational. She did not treat me as a victim or as an emotional liability, but as a person with agency who deserved to understand every page that carried her name. I sat alone after the call ended and stared at the ceiling. The emotional storm inside me did not calm, but it gained direction. By agreeing to work with Marcia, I was choosing not to bury the truth, but also not to destroy my daughter impulsively. It was a temporary middle ground, neither attack nor surrender. Before falling asleep, I whispered silently inside my own mind that love without accountability becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without choice becomes abuse. I decided to move forward with quiet resolve, knowing that every step from now on needed to honor not only my maternal heart, but also my right to survive with dignity. If you're still watching and trying to predict how this will end, comment number 6 below so I know you're not giving up. Now, get ready. We are stepping into Chapter 7. During the days that followed, the energy surrounding the retreat company shifted in ways that were subtle at first, like a small tremor beneath the ground that only sensitive feet could feel. Employees moved quietly through the office hallways. Meetings were shortened without explanation. Messages were exchanged in guarded tones. I sensed that a private narrative was forming around me, although no one spoke it openly. The promise-filled atmosphere that Olivia once celebrated with boundless enthusiasm began to thin like mist exposed to sunlight. Olivia kept her distance from me almost immediately after the meeting with the investor and attorney. Each message I sent her received a delayed, brief, or emotionally distant reply. Sometimes there was no reply at all. Her words, when they arrived, carried no warmth. They felt crafted, not spoken. She began to view my presence not as a mother who had raised her with unconditional support, but as an obstacle placed in front of the company she believed would define her identity. It struck me deeply to realize how easily truth could be rewritten inside her mind when ambition demanded a villain. Rumors circulated quietly within the company. Although I did not work there, the word still reached me through indirect channels. Some employees believed that I was attempting to sabotage the retreat project because I could not understand the modern entrepreneurial world. Others believed I was attempting to seize full control for personal gain. Even though none of them had spoken directly to me, the idea that they could judge my character without hearing my intentions felt like an invisible sentence handed down by strangers. Suppliers and partners began expressing sudden hesitations. Emails that once contained enthusiastic language shifted into vague concerns. A few postponed meetings, while others asked for legal reassurances. It became evident that the discovery made in the boardroom had triggered a wave of uncertainty far larger than Olivia had anticipated. Instead of recognizing the deeper issue, Olivia blamed me, believing that if I had remained silent, no disruption would have occurred. Our conversations, when unavoidable, transformed into exchanges that lacked emotion. Instead of a daughter speaking to her mother, I heard an entrepreneur negotiating with a liability. There was no acknowledgement of how deeply I had been hurt, nor any attempt to understand the position she had placed me in. The fragile bond that we had built throughout years of shared struggles now felt like a rope frayed by neglect and strain. I spent long nights lying awake, questioning whether love alone could withstand the absence of accountability. My health began to reflect the emotional weight I carried. Sleep arrived in short fragments rather than restful hours. My appetite faded. My thoughts looped endlessly, turning over every detail as though clarity might appear if I examined it from enough angles. The loneliness I felt was not simply the absence of company. It was the realization that I had been recast in my daughter's story as the antagonist, despite only trying to protect what was mine. One afternoon, Harold Coleman called, sensing a heaviness in my voice even though I tried to sound composed. He listened with patience and spoke with the quiet wisdom of someone who had watched life unfold in many complicated patterns. He shared that financial disputes often reveal truths that emotions work hard to hide. He reminded me gently that peace does not always mean winning or keeping everything, but rather choosing what allows the soul to remain intact. That night, I stood alone on the balcony of my hotel room. The lights of Austin stretched across the distance like a field of stars built on concrete instead of sky cars moved far below, each representing a life that did not belong to mine. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the night air settle against my skin. A painful question echoed inside my mind. If protecting my future required me to be seen as a traitor by the very person I once protected, what did motherhood demand next? I woke the next morning with no sense of rest, but with a new clarity forming inside me. The emotional ache had not disappeared, but it no longer felt like a force that controlled me. The situation had shifted from personal betrayal to a complex discovery, and I could no longer view what happened as a simple act of selfishness by my daughter. Something larger, darker, and more calculated seemed to be operating behind her decisions. I contacted Marcia and agreed to begin a discreet information gathering process. We created a private communication channel with encrypted email exchanges and planned weekly virtual meetings that would leave no trace connected to the company network. I forwarded every document, electronic signature file, and message I possessed from the day I began the home purchase process until the most recent confrontation. While reviewing them, Marcia discovered several emails that appeared to have been edited before being forwarded to investors. A few sentences were altered to suggest that I had expressed enthusiasm about making the mansion available for future corporate use, even though I had never said such words. She also found a fundraising presentation that listed me as executive sponsor and strategic partner, which implied that I had authorized mentoring, funding, and approval roles that had never occurred. In reality, I realized that my image had been manufactured into an asset, not through admiration, but through utility. I asked Harold for further help, knowing that his experience offered a perspective that neither emotional involvement nor corporate pressure could distort. He joined me at my dining table and carefully reviewed financial reports that I had received indirectly through Olivia. With slow and meticulous focus, he identified several irregular patterns. Certain marketing expenses appeared to be routed through unrelated third-party accounts, and some payment dates did not match the timestamps on related invoices. He suspected that the company might have been using circular transactions to appear more stable than it truly was. His concern was quiet and serious, the kind that comes from experience rather than alarm. The next step required legal clarity, not emotional interpretation. I met with my attorney again to update him on what was found. He explained that altered documents, misrepresented investor presentations, and unauthorized use of identity could fall under multiple categories, including contractual fraud and investment misrepresentation. He instructed me to gather verifiable evidence for each claim and remain silent toward Olivia while the investigation continued. His words felt heavy, but they also felt like a door opening toward justice rather than chaos. During the deeper review, we uncovered something that forced me to stop and steady my breath. Hidden in one long email thread was the name of a business consultant from Colorado who had advised Olivia on leverage-based trust building. We researched his name and learned through public articles that he had previously been associated with a controversial startup that collapsed under accusations of investor deception. The consultant had encouraged founders to use emotional leverage and personal relationships when seeking funds, claiming that personal trust is faster than paperwork. I felt my stomach tighten as I realized that Olivia had not acted entirely without influence. She had been guided, encouraged, and possibly manipulated by someone who treated ethics as optional. This discovery did not erase my pain, but it reframed it. Olivia had made choices, but she had also been drawn into a philosophy that rewarded ambition at any cost. I no longer saw myself only as someone who needed protection. I saw myself as the last barrier between her and complete destruction. I knew that moving forward would require strength that reached beyond emotion. I decided that my goal would not be to defeat her, but to free both of us from the trap we had stepped into, one knowingly and one unknowingly. If you're still here and can sense the final truth approaching, comment number 8 below and stay with me. Now, let's move into the end, the conclusion you were never prepared for. I spent several days gathering every piece of evidence with deliberate care, as if each document were a brick needed to rebuild the foundation of my life. I organized email threads, printed versions of altered content, bank statement screenshots, timelines, and highlighted explanations. I included the findings from Marcia, the detailed notes from Harold, and the legal interpretation from my attorney. For the first time since everything began, I felt that the truth no longer lived inside my chest alone, but on paper where it could breathe and stand on its own. A formal meeting was arranged at a neutral legal conference center in Austin. The participants included my attorney, Marcia, a hired forensic digital analyst, the company attorney, the former business consultant from Colorado who appeared through a mandatory legal summons, and Olivia. The room looked sterile, with gray walls and a long table that reminded me of an operating room where something sick was about to be examined. I felt no desire for victory or revenge. I only wanted honesty to be spoken without distortion. When the meeting began, my attorney presented documents in a chronological sequence. He explained that several digital forms did not include legally valid consent. He demonstrated mismatches between my actual signed content and versions sent to investors. The analyst proved that certain lines in email messages had been modified after my original response. Harold's analysis was summarized, pointing out financial circulation patterns that needed professional investigation. The consultant was questioned about his involvement, and he admitted to advising founders to borrow trust if needed for credibility. His admission filled the room with a cold awareness that the harm was not accidental. Olivia sat across from me, silent at first, then defensive, then gradually shaken. The evidence left no room for interpretation. She lowered her gaze while her breathing quickened, and her hands shook slightly. When the consultant admitted that he had encouraged her to move forward without hesitation, because of whom emotional leverage is a shortcut, she stared at him with disbelief, as though she had just realized he was not a mentor, but a manipulator. She whispered that she never wanted to hurt me, but the words felt smaller than the damage. Marcia announced that she was withdrawing investment immediately and would cooperate with a full investigation. The consultant was served with written notification that further involvement with the company was suspended pending review. The company attorney had no defense except to acknowledge that legal consequences might follow. My attorney confirmed that the mansion could be legally protected through immediate filings to reverse its collateral status. The room fell into heavy silence. Olivia finally asked in a fragile voice whether I still considered her my daughter. After everything that happened, I answered slowly, not to wound her, but to speak truth that could lead to healing. I said that my love had not disappeared, but love without trust cannot survive unchanged. She cried openly, not as a business founder, but as the child I once held during storms she could not remember. That evening, I prepared to return to Sarasota. I did not know exactly what future waited for either of us, but I felt the ground beneath my feet again. My story would not end with fear, and my home would not be built on silent sacrifice. The path forward would require rebuilding, not forgetting. I returned to Sarasota several weeks after the final meeting, carrying only 2 suitcases and a folder of legal documents that confirmed the mansion was once again fully protected under my name. When I stepped inside, the house felt both familiar and changed, as if it was silently acknowledging the journey that had taken place. The walls, the echo of footsteps across the marble floor, and the gentle view of the water no longer represented a dream of retirement, but a reminder of personal boundaries learned through pain. I walked through each room slowly, touching door frames and light switches with calm acceptance rather than anxious attachment. The house no longer symbolized escape. It symbolized responsibility for my own life. In the following weeks, I created a quiet routine that supported healing rather than distraction. I scheduled weekly sessions with a licensed therapist who specialized in family dynamics involving adult children. She encouraged me to separate unconditional love from unconditional sacrifice. I learned that emotional safety is not selfishness, but the foundation that keeps love from becoming dependency or control. I joined a private support group for parents who had experienced manipulation, estrangement, or financial exploitation by their adult children. Listening to their stories made me realize that my pain was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger silent struggle that many older parents carried behind polite smiles. Sleep slowly returned in longer stretches. I wrote daily in a journal, sometimes filling several pages with reflections. Rather than events, I stopped questioning whether I had failed as a mother and began exploring how resilience might grow from recognition instead of regret. My mornings were spent walking along the waterfront near the estate, breathing slowly, watching pelicans glide across calm water. I no longer evaluated my worth through someone else's achievements, choices, or approval. Peace was no longer a place I wanted to reach. It was a skill I needed to practice. During this time, Olivia and I did not speak through long emotional conversations. Instead, she sent handwritten letters every 2 weeks. The letters were careful, reflective, and filled with sentences that acknowledged accountability rather than excuses. She did not ask for immediate forgiveness. She did not describe herself as a victim. She wrote about her confusion, her fear of failure, and the way ambition had become a mask she could not remove. She also described her work with a therapist who encouraged her to explore where her sense of worth had first become tied to external success. I responded periodically with short letters, expressing care without stepping back into emotional risk before both of us were ready. The mansion eventually became a place filled with new meaning. I transformed one of the empty rooms into a personal library with soft chairs, shelves of books about psychology, ethics, boundaries, and memoirs of older women who rebuilt their identities after significant emotional transitions. I planted flowers along the back garden walkway, choosing varieties that bloomed in different seasons to remind myself that growth never ends, even when life feels dormant. The lesson I carried forward was not that love is dangerous, nor that trust is foolish. Instead, I learned that love must include clear boundaries, and trust must stay connected to consent, transparency, and mutual responsibility. Parents are not life insurance policies, emotional shock absorbers, or renewable financial resources. Our lives hold value beyond what we give, It is not betrayal to defend the life we have built. It is not abandonment to refuse exploitation disguised as devotion. My story did not end with perfect reconciliation or cinematic resolution. It ended with a door left open, but guarded with awareness and dignity. Olivia and I were no longer standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. We were simply two women, learning separately, preparing for the possibility of rebuilding something honest. If healing arrives someday, it would not be the result of erasing the past, but of walking forward with clarity, respect, and earned trust. When life cracks in unexpected places, it is easy to believe that love has failed, but sometimes it is simply revealing where boundaries were never built. Trust is not a gift handed endlessly to others. It is a living agreement that must be renewed through honesty, clarity, and shared responsibility. The journey toward healing is rarely loud or dramatic. It often begins quietly, with courage to tell the truth, willingness to face discomfort, and strength to protect one's dignity even when the heart trembles. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and growth does not require perfection. It simply asks that we rise with wiser hearts, steadier voices, and a deeper understanding that self-respect and love must walk together, never apart. Thank you so much for watching and sharing your time with this story. If it touched you in any way, please leave your thoughts below, follow, and subscribe for more meaningful journeys ahead.